step forward, please. And thank you. On behalf of the municipality, you went in there and again, risked your life and limb. Barely made it through this time. It was a little bit marginal.
Yeah.
We'll cover that later. But on behalf of the municipality, thank you very much. And we had some letters that came into Mayor and Council. Just a quick précis on them, but here's fantastic, great attitude, exemplary, wow. Good humor, outstanding, enthusiastic. Wow, all the
And the ability to run fast up.
Really? Yeah.
Again and again, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And patience, and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you very
much. So Sophie put together just a little ditty here. And it says, there once was a jewel from Bowen. Of the zipper she was all-knowing. She got us on our way with fewer delays, even when it was snowing. For more than 42 days, she put up with rents. She put up with raves. She put up with scoundrels, cheats, and knaves. She made the most dissident liners behave. Oh yeah. So today we say...
Very good.
So we say thanks to Jewel, who helped us keep our cool through the Bowen Queen's reign, which is the island's bane. We say to you, Jewel, you rule. Yes! And on behalf of the municipality, I don't know, this is very sadistic because it's an experience card. Thank you. Really. Well, that's a great idea. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's suitable for framing.
For your records. Oh, thank you. Oh, awesome. Great. I'll get a copy.
So we're all good to go here. The open of the council meeting and approval of the agenda. Late items, Hope?
There are no late items.
Oh, okay. We're making it very simple. And anybody have anything they want to add or subtract or that sort of thing? Okay. Move it. Oh, okay. I spoke too soon.
Some council members are interested in going to Lower Mainland Local Government
Yeah.
Association. and-
Whistler.
Yeah.
We do have to cover that.
Convention.
Yeah.
I just don't know where we put it.
I was gonna add that to the next agenda.
Yeah.
Fine.
Just because I didn't have a chance to draft a motion, but I saw
Fine.
your email.
Okay, I
Okay.
withdraw that.
Okay, that's nice then.
I'll
Would you like
pass.
to move the approval?
All the-
Okay, thank you. Second, all in favor? Thank you. Approved unanimously. Public comments. Well, what do we got?
We have two this evening. Robin Berger
All right.
regarding Bowen housing.
Hey, Ron, step right up. Welcome. And thank you, not forever, but
Yeah,
this is quite some.
circulating a bit.
Yeah.
Mayor and council.
Mhm.
Just put it here so you can refer to it.
Sure, I don't really need to.
Okay.
Kind of know what's in there.
Yeah, I guess.
I wanted to go on public record with some of my MA degree work. This will just take a couple minutes.
All right.
Before it collects dust and or resurfaces in another version. This thesis was entitled Policy Advocacy for Affordable Housing on Bowen Island. It's had quite a journey, but here we are. This research contribution was intended to benefit those in our community who need housing. It's also dedicated and acknowledges all the longtime island volunteers in housing who devoted so much of their time. A few of the highlights. I undertook this research as a now 30-year Bowen resident, a single mom, needing an affordable rental, and the challenges of finding stable rental housing. I had to move twice while I was writing this. It covers some of the history, context, and roles of government in housing policy at federal level and BC provincial and municipal levels. It also includes a look at grassroots activism, community and governmental coalitions and collaborations, and some barriers to the provision of housing on Bowen Island. Additionally, this work includes a review of Bowen's housing policies and discussion of findings, offering some recommendations on page 141 and 142. I'm pleased to find that some of these have come to bear. Maybe not in an order that could be more conducive of change, but nonetheless some have taken place. There's still a lot of reinvention, steps missing, and a lot more to do. It's my hope going forward that more members of the Bowen community take an active role in providing housing for all islanders now and in the future. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, Robin.
I'll get the other copy I have to take off.
Other copy is around here.
There's one here.
Yep.
Yep.
She would like it back.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
I'll take it
Thanks,
down.
Rob.
If you see one again, the recommendation is the green page, the green marker.
I'd like to read that, but I can't do it right now.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. See you guys.
See you later, Robin. Thank you. Okay, Hope.
And Jane Skipsey regarding the temporary use permit.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hey, Jane.
How are you? Received this by email.
I'm okay, I'm good.
Good.
I'm a little nervous because trying to go, this is not my
Don't
cup of
be.
tea. Not my cup of tea, but I just, I feel very strongly, and I would just like to say a few words just to keep this, you updated of what's been going on since our last council meeting that I attended. As you know, I'm the closest resident to the Evergreen Hall and have lived there for 12 years. And have never had a problem with the bed and breakfast there. It's been a great symbiotic relationship. So since I attended the last council meeting, and I heard council say that you wanted to hear from affected neighbors, I've been greatly disturbed by some of the events that have gone on around this proposal. The undercurrent article is very fairly written, came out and was published in print and online. The proponents took the online and shared it, asking people for input. And mostly the input was from proponents, making statements which were not entirely accurate. One calling residents who are opposed to be cotton-headed ninny-muggins. Another attacking our immediate neighbor, who also wrote a letter and stated that it could affect property values and maybe up or down, she wasn't sure. Took that, reconstructed it into property values would drop like a bomb to try to get people against her, which she really stuck her neck out to even make a letter. She is also our immediate neighbor, so is backs onto the property as well. And I did talk to her, and she's fine with me bringing this forward. Also, there was a general characterization of opponents in Deep Bay as being selfish people who are not wanting to share. Mostly the comments are islanders not directly affected by the TUP who do not live in our neighborhood. And many think that we should just be delighted to have a school in our neighborhood. I resent being put in this position. It's very, very challenging for me. I've donated volunteer time to the community. I've donated artworks. They're sold for good prices at the gallery. I've had, my husband and I have been active community members for a long time. He's been on the island for 20 years, and he's worked with all kinds of organizations on the island. And I just believe that the OCP and our bylaws are here for a reason under the Local Government Act to avoid this kind of conflict and sort of abuse of people who have an opinion, online abuse. I have taught in the public school system for 30 years. Before that, I was a swimming teacher. Before that, I was a park naturalist. So I have done a lot with children, and partly that is why I do not choose to retire beside a school. I do not really want one dropped into my backyard. I've spoken with Daniel about that and suggested that I will have to move. I just do not really want that. So I would hope that we can find another solution, because I'm not against the school. I know they do good things, I know they're good people. But I really would like to be able to enjoy my home and my property, which is my house is 24 feet from the fence line, which is where the children will be playing. And I guess what am I afraid of? I'm afraid that our agreed upon bylaws will be circumvented without due process, thereby setting a precedent in this community. So that's all I just want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
Certainly are. Anybody have any questions? I mean, her house definitely is on the
Right there,
picture, it's
yeah.
right there.
See, and I really wanted to go to this meeting that they had, but I was out of town, I couldn't go. Did you go to that, and what were your
I
thoughts?
chose not to go to the meeting. There's nothing anybody can say to change my mind. I really do not want that to go ahead. I have a lot of other concerns in terms of safety of the children. Being a teacher and witnessing, in my career, 2 children being struck by cars and killed, and I went to their services. You know, I know what children are like, and I know that very quickly they could run out in front of a car. And I don't want to feel like every time I back out of my driveway that I could run over somebody. I mean, I do already, but not children so much. And I'm very careful when I back out. But, you know, it's just a situation where it's very dangerous. Melmore is very dangerous for pedestrians. You know, it's very narrow, etc. So,
All right, anybody else?
No, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And, okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Anybody have anything there they want to have a closer look at? Allison,
3.5 and 3.8.
3.5 and 3.8. Okay. Anybody else? All right. I'll move that the consent agenda as outlined in the February 24, 2020 consent agenda as amended be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. It's unanimous. And we'll move on to, I'll turn the pages fast enough here. Delegations. We have no delegations. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes. Covenant amendment for 341 Josephine Drive, Emma Chow, Island Community Planner. Hi, Emma.
Mayor, Council. This is a deferral from the last council meeting for 341 Josephine Drive, a covenant amendment application to reduce the area of a protective covenant. The subject property is located on the eastern shore of Josephine Lake, and it contains protective covenants for both riparian area and drinking water quality of Josephine Lake, as do all of the surrounding properties around the lake. This covenant was first put in place at time of subdivision in 2002. The property is this lot right here, and this portion of the property is actually under a riparian area covenant, and the covenant in question is the area highlighted in red, and the intent of that covenant is to protect water quality and the natural state of the area surrounding Josephine Lake. The original covenant area was 0.5 hectares, roughly. In 2011, this area was reduced to 0.35 hectares to facilitate the construction of a house in this area here. The current application is proposing a further reduction of the covenant area to 0.2 hectares, and that entails the removal of the area in the middle of the property, which essentially is the area that encompasses a wetland on that property. An environmental assessment was received for this application, and the qualified environmental professional that authored the report stated that no detrimental impact was found for the proposal. And staff review did yield some outstanding concerns around the impacts of removing the wetland protective area in terms of drinking quality, drinking water quality, and also the impacts of the habitat, that it may create habitat for invasive species. There's also the question of climate change that might move the natural boundary closer to these wetlands, making the hydrological connection stronger, and the role of the wetlands in preserving water quality even higher. That being said, the entire property is within a development permit area, and any actual development will require a development permit. So this will include tree removal and the type of landscaping work that the applicant is requesting the amendment for. At that point, staff hopes that they could address some of these outstanding concerns through either additional conditions as part of the permit or further professional study. With that, the previous staff recommendation still stands to recommend that council authorize the amendment.
All right, where do we start? So, you wanna go again?
Thank you, Emma, and I went for the walkabout with a couple of other council members on Friday.
Yeah.
And then I shared some photos the next morning with Councillor Nicholson on Ferries. And I'll be voting against this motion. My reasons for doing this are because Josephine Lake is not just a lake, it's a reservoir. It's the water supply for the Cowan Point area, and that's why that protective covenant was put on there back in 2002, was to protect the shorelines of the lake, which protected the water quality. And now we know about climate change, and I believe the lake level has been raised once already.
Yeah.
And I think in the future, with longer, drier summers, and it's possible that the lake level may need to be raised again, in which case the water shoreline would move up closer to the existing house. And I saw disturbances of the covenanted area when I was there, which were concerning to me. A place where a trench had been dug through a creek, and I saw trees cut. I'm not sure that they were, maybe they were hazard trees, I'm not sure. But I think we should take a precautionary approach here, and as the council did back in 2002 when this was established. And I also am concerned about the covenant setting a precedent. You can come and ask for a cosmetic kind of change to a protective covenant, and council will, anyway, I wonder about all our covenants and how often we'll be approached for that. But basically, we need to protect the drinking water as much today as we did back in 2002, if not more. So I'll be voting against this.
All right, next, David?
Sure. So I was very pleased to go on the site visit, because when I read this report at our previous council meeting, I thought the report was very positive, and I was prepared to vote in favor of this. From the site visit, for all the reasons that Sue Ellen has pointed out, I would now vote against it. I found some of the statements in the environmental report actually hard to understand. The idea of improving the environmental, sort of the productivity of the wetland, and the fact that it would not it would not be connected to the lake. It seemed hard to believe that there was no connection between this wetland and the lake. So for the reasons that Sue Ellen has said, I agree with her position. I would also vote against this.
I also went on a site visit, and there was definitely a lot of water in the areas at that time, and I said, well, that probably is very important for the lake. I don't know about the recharge, that it does dry up in the summertime, so it's almost ephemeral as far as going supplying water to the lake. And so the idea here and the recommendation is to go to a 2-meter barrier around the wetland, as it were, at high tide wetland mark. And yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think it, he makes it quite clear that he doesn't think that it will affect the water quality into Josephine. Anyway, I'm okay with that. I don't think, I think he's protected it with the area around the wetland, putting 7 feet around the whole wetland. I think that's good. I think the original intent obviously was to put some lines on the map, and I think he feels, and he did the original, he feels that it's still protected to the same extent. So I don't have a problem with the removal of that part. Anybody else, Allison?
Emma, can you put the map back up that's got the long red mark that sort of looks like a foot?
This one?
And that red is going to be left, correct?
That's what they're proposing, yes.
And there's a fairly large buffer from the edge of that to the edge of the lake, correct?
This area here, yes,
Yeah,
that's
and
riparian.
and that's all riparian area covenant.
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember back when we did all that, digging around and put all those covenants on. There's no pictures of the actual wetland that they want to remove. That's not where the digging was. Is
This,
that-
Sort of like
this
that.
is part of the wetland. The majority of it, I'd say, would be sitting here. This was actually
Trench.
a trench that was dug 2 years ago. That was not permitted.
So why did they dig the trench?
To connect to their pump house, we had to do some remediation.
But were they trying to access the water for?
No, they were connecting their house to the pump house. I don't
Septic.
know why they cited the pump house on the other side of the wetland.
Oh, well, maybe so that it would be, there were only certain sites for the septic fields and stuff for treatment things. Okay, so what are they gonna proposing to do with the area?
I don't have any details other than they want to do landscaping.
So it's still gonna be left with plants and things. I guess, just thinking of the water sources, there's some way to amend the covenant so that they don't use pesticides and, non-organic type fertilizer stuff and so forth, so that there's no seepage. I'm assuming it's all downhill to the lake from there or not? That's just the other question.
It is.
Yeah, so that there wouldn't be any seepage.
Conditions can be placed on the development permit, yes.
Not on the development permit, but it would be removed. Do they have to get a development permit to do the work they want to do in the wetland once the covenant's removed?
Any work on this property, yes.
And, okay, so it's not just that strip along the water. So they have to get a development permit for any work. Okay, so then I'm okay with the removal.
Hey, Rob?
Emma, can you go back to the map, the first one, yeah. So, yeah, so, I mean, so this is for me the problem. That's what it was, then the next one, carve out a house, then the next one, we carve out that for landscaping, and that's sort of that progressive sort of, what we talk about, things start to sprawl and all that. And I know people that live in that area that are probably gonna jump on this, like, oh, because they have a lot in covenant right now too, where they can't develop on it. So I think this is setting not a great precedent for that. I mean, the property was bought knowing that this is part of, you can't build on here, and now we're going up and saying, oh, now you can because they're asking. I think other people are gonna start asking the same thing, and I think we need to hold the line on that, and so I'm not gonna be supporting the motion.
Okay, anybody else? Maureen?
Just a question, and you may not be able to answer it, Emma, but it has to do with the extent of the covenanted areas on other properties nearby. Is that half hectare, is that typical of the lots there, that they would all have had similarly large covenanted areas at the beginning?
2.5 acres.
The riparian, yeah, the riparian covenant that is not the subject of this amendment. That distance from the natural boundary of Josephine Lake is at the 30 meters, and that is consistent on all the properties. The covenant that is the subject of this amendment is for protecting water quality in the natural state of the surrounding area. That varies from property to property, and it is based on what was deemed important in terms of hydrology at the time, like the hydrological connection to the lake. So the wetlands, which took up a large portion of this property, is the reason why this property had such a large covenant area.
Okay, so the covenants are actually nuanced in terms of the conditions on the land.
Each lot, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Allison?
Are there any pictures of what the wetland looked like back in, I guess that was early 90s when those lots were created and those covenants were put on?
I don't have any pictures.
Didn't see.
They're not man-made, though, they are natural.
Well, no, I know they're natural, but sometimes wetlands with trees around and everything else tend to fill in. Get smaller and smaller, so.
Yeah, just from the environmental conclusion here from Whitehead and Associates. The proposed removal of wetland 1 from the existing covenant area on your lot would not be detrimental to the intent of the original covenant to protect water quality of Josephine Lake. So that's coming from a licensed and registered environmentalist. But, yeah, whatever qualified.
May I just very quickly make that? The original purpose of these so marked areas was to protect the water quality in Josephine Lake. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And it would seem from the environmental report that doing this does not endanger the water in the lake. Do I read that correctly from the report? That is what the report says.
That is the QEP statement.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to read the recommendation. The council authorizes the mayor and corporate officer to enter into a covenant amendment attached to the staff report dated December 13th, 2019 for 341 Josephine Drive, legally described as Lot 33, District Lot 1546 and 1547, Group 1, BCP 1422. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, I'll ask a question. All in favor? Okay, 4 in favor. Opposed? 3 in opposition. That's councillors talking, whining, and fast. Thank you. It passes. Okay, move on to bylaws, municipal and regional district tax program bylaw number 504. Back to Emma. Thank you.
The bylaws coming back for second and third reading. The whereas has been amended to specify tourism management as per council direction. And the 5-year strategic business plan has also been included for council review.
Any further discussion with Emma? Everybody's read through it. It's, she made the amendments that we requested. Maureen?
We are seeing the 5-year strategic business plan for the first time. And my questions have to do with the standing of that 5-year business plan. The kinds of Tourism Bowen? And who is doing the monitoring of the progress of this business plan?
We are, I mean, the municipality.
Municipality.
Yes, we are the applicant, the designated recipient. We are the legal holders of all the revenue and also the administrator responsible for annual reporting.
Okay. I was struck by how little was said about the affordable housing part of things. There are pages on the tourism side.
Yeah, I guess like, should put a little introduction to that. When the affordable housing initiatives were added to this program, it did not come with any requirement for consultation. So if we are using OAP revenue for affordable housing, we do not need to bring that out for consultation. The only component that requires 50% support from the local accommodation providers is the tourism projects that we propose in the 5-year plan.
Okay. And is this a standard format that they ask you to complete?
This is their template. I've just put the Bowen brand on it.
Okay, thank you.
Allison?
Up in the beginning of the plan, where I'm here, you've got a reference to it being a sustainable alternative to Victoria. That's on page 1 under strategic context. I mean, a short scenic ferry ride from Horseshoe Bay doesn't get you anywhere near Victoria. Bowen is the accessible, affordable alternative to Vancouver. Who realize Vancouver Island is not a feasible day trip, but it's an affordable alternative to going to the 901 up island. I mean, if you were, not necessarily, I just couldn't understand the alternative to Victoria being there. No problem with saying an alternative to Vancouver Island. So this goes to Destination BC as part of the application?
Yes.
Yeah. And because it's related to tourism, I gather you got input from Tourism Bowen Island on it?
This was done in collaboration.
And so they've seen the final product,
Yes,
and they're happy with it?
yes, and Victoria came from Tourism Bowen Island.
Ah.
But if you would like it changed, I can.
Well,
say
I
that.
just doesn't make a lot of sense to me that it's an alternative day trip to Victoria, certainly Vancouver Island.
Anybody else, Maureen?
Just the budget, I'm just really trying to get my head around some of this. So what you're showing here, Emma, is that the MRDT anticipated income in year 1 is $30,000.
Mhm.
Okay. And of that, you're showing you're still showing the municipality is contributing $22,000 for affordable housing. So I guess my question, it's probably clear to everyone else, but my question is, how is that MRDT revenue being split in this budget?
Under the municipal grant under affordable housing was just an estimate that came from Birch. So this is not an amount that we have a service agreement in place for, or it's just an estimate, which can be revised. But as far as the split, the 30,000 MRDT revenue that is estimated for the first year is split 50%. So under the expenses, if you, if you add up the tourism expenses and the affordable housing expenses. Affordable housing 37,000 is the 22,000 revenue grants plus the 15,000, 50% of the MRDT.
Okay. So it does split 50/50. And then to come back to the general MRDT revenue, there's only 10,000 projected to come in for general MRDT, and that's the money that must go to tourism.
Yes. Current application, yes.
Okay, so I'm not disputing the distribution here, but the point that I raised subsequent to our last council meeting regarding the obligation for the split of the money, 50/50, that obligation is as a result of commitments that council has made, not as a result of the regulations for the MRDT.
The MRDT program allows 100% of the OAP revenue to go towards affordable housing without any need for consultation.
So in a subsequent year, could that split be modified, or does this commit us on an ongoing basis to a 50/50 split?
As far as I've been told, this application is good for 5 years, but during any time during 5 years, if the municipality wishes to reapply with a different application, they're entitled to do so.
Okay, so it actually is another application to change that. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Michael? I think I'm on the right point of clarification, that to allow the various entities to do some planning for 5 years does at least say, to all intents and purposes, you know, so that the income does not fluctuate and yo-yo backwards and forwards. And the intention was to provide it for continuity of planning of the various entities. And of course, originally the tax was, going back such a long time, the tax was originally imposed by the industry on itself for marketing purposes in Vancouver. What we have here is the sort of 2020 derivative, and where it's quite obvious times have changed, and thus you see the 50/50 split, and hopefully some agreed degree of continuity so that both entities can go plan and make their way ahead. Because I think that's it's very difficult to run an enterprise where your revenue source isn't at least guaranteed, and you can set your stall out accordingly.
Alison?
I guess the other is on the numbers. The online accommodation provider $20,000 number. That how did you arrive at those two numbers, the general revenue and the online?
That was based on numbers that we received from third-party analysis.
So, but I guess the third-party analysis listed the number of people that were listed on online service providers?
We had estimates for all accommodation providers.
Okay, because I guess
I
my
had multiple sources and I tried to take the conservative.
yeah, it just surprised me that 2/3 of the service providers would use an online service rather than doing it themselves.
Actually, it was higher, but we are anticipating with the, at least the feedback I got from Tourism Bowen Island is that if we pass the short-term rental policy amendments, that we would likely see a decrease in the online accommodation platforms. So I took that into account when I made this estimate. This is a very low estimate compared to the numbers we have.
And is there an exclusivity agreement with the online service providers? Like if you list with them, can you also just rent it out yourself?
I'm not familiar with the agreements with the online.
I can,
Because I guess
I can answer that one. You can set up your agreement with any online service providers. And the reason that they're used so enormously is just about everybody is making their reservations that way. You can certainly rent it out yourself. What you cannot do is undersell. You cannot. If I am Booking.com and you have an agreement with me for $100, and then you go and rent your accommodation, say, but if you rent with me, I will only charge you 90, and that is where you're in contravention with the agreement. So, but there's nothing to stop you at a parallel price renting yours out. What you can't do is discount me, because I'm going to the public and saying I'm good value if you use me. So you can't underwrite or undervalue that promise I make to the general public.
Because I guess I was reading the legislation to be that if it had to be exclusively with the online service providers to end up in that OAP, that if you did a half and half or something, then it all ended up in general.
So, for clarity, the only online accommodation platform that is registered with the province is Airbnb. So right now, I can't say for moving forward, right now, the only revenue that will be reported as OAP revenue will be that comes from Airbnb. For now.
All right, any further discussion? Rob?
Yeah, this is more just a general comment on tourism, and I like the idea of boosting the shoulder season, because there's already in the summer a lot of like backlash against more tourism, so the last thing we want to do is just keep pushing that. But, and you know, when you look at the strategic overview of what the goals are, it's okay, but, you know, it's sort of like I just came back from Whistler where, you know, they got recyclable doggy poop bags, and meanwhile, like as an environmental thing they're doing, and meanwhile everybody's flying there from Timbuktu to go skiing for 2 days. And so this whole idea of internet, like attracting international travelers, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. That's the least environmental thing we could possibly be doing in our tourism sector right now. So, you know, I'm really happy to see the language in here of attracting locals from Metro Vancouver as a nature escape. But I cringe at the thought of, you know, this here promoting people from Alberta and it's close to YVR and all that kind of stuff. So that's more just a generalized comment about where we're moving forward with tourism. But I'd really like to see our tourism policy focus locally in this area versus trying to do what Whistler's doing and all that and just attracting more air flight over here for a nature experience. So it's just a generalized comment. So.
Any further comments? Somebody want to read his recommendation?
That bylaw number 504/2020 cited by Bowen Municipality short-term accommodation tax bylaw number 504/2020 be read a second and third time, and the council received for information the 5-year strategic business plan for the municipal and regional district tax program application as requested by council.
Can we
Second.
delete the last three as requested by council? We did ask for it, but I believe the MRDT program requires them to give it to us.
I'm certainly happy with that. I'm fine with that. If that's a friendly amendment everyone else is happy with.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Anybody else? Okay, friendly amendment.
Second that.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. And I guess that's it, Emma.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. Proposed planning and development procedures bylaw number 494/2019. Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't have a presentation for this bylaw tonight. I did come to you in November with the bylaw, and then again at the February 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting. And so the bylaw is back for consideration of first reading. And the bylaw is largely unchanged from that Committee of the Whole meeting. The one element that I did go in and add to the proposed draft bylaw is a section, before the section on independent review, is a section about terms of reference. So allowing staff the ability to essentially require terms of reference of a study before a study is completed. And it goes through the things that can go in that terms of reference. So it's sort of on a, it's something that's similar in some of the Islands Trust bylaws, and where we think we would use it probably right off the bat is the most common study we have is for our environmental VPs. And so we'd probably develop just a terms of reference that's a standard, and we would say, okay, we're looking for an environmental report for that you're not impacting the water flow, and so this is what the terms of reference would look like, and that would be like a piece of the information piece. And then it especially gives us the ability when we're dealing with sort of one-off studies that we don't do a lot of, so it's like a rezoning where we're saying, okay, we want you to study this particular thing. We would then have input in the terms of reference and say, okay, this is exactly what we're looking for, so they don't go and spend money on a report and come back and find out later that actually wanted them to look at something else. Yeah, so that's basically all the changes that I have there.
Right.
And so I'm looking for first reading at this meeting, in part, just trying to give it more time to sort of lengthen it out. It's quite a complex file, a lot of different pieces in, so it's like bring it for people to look at, again, come back for a second reading.
Yeah, that's fine.
Allison?
No problem with taking it out there for a first reading, but how are we going to, right now it's gone around committees and now it needs to go out to the construction, the development industry, and stuff like that, so is it a given that you're gonna hold an open house or information meeting, or?
I know I hadn't put that schedule in the report, and I think because I wasn't sure if I was gonna do it after first or second. But I think I'm gonna do it for first, and so I could get a motion as well to, you know, to undergo consultation on that.
And that, okay, so I would add to the recommendation that I don't think it's been moved at this point, and that staff be requested to undertake a public consultation process. Is that good word?
I mean, I'd say directed, I guess, instead of requested. But
Staff be directed.
yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Sue.
I'm in support of this motion and in taking it out to the community for consultation.
Yep.
And I think it's been a long time coming, and so I'd like to move the motion.
Perfect.
Second that.
Thank you, David. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, it's unanimous. And, staff report, simple one, community childcare planning final grant support. Shauna.
Hello. So we're here this evening to present the Community Childcare Space Creation Action Plan. This was a joint initiative that some grant funding was received. BIM and Bowen Children's Center jointly applied for a grant from the province, and so Anne Sullivan is here representing the Children's Center tonight. BIM, we received $22,520 in order to do a report, and Sudie Tigan is the consultant who is here, and she has prepared the plan for us. Just for a little bit of background, there were 4 main project deliverables that were going to come out of this grant. One was an inventory of current childcare services and the available spaces on the island. One was the identification of the community childcare needs. One was the creation of an action plan to meet the identified needs, and that will include short, medium, and long-term goals. And the 4th is a final grant reconciliation and report submission, and we're here today because all of the grant, all the working activities associated with the funding needs to be done by the end of February, and the submission will be made by March 31st. So just wanted to make a couple comments about the creation of the action plan, meeting the identified needs. And British Columbia has identified the importance of childcare space creation as one of their current funding priorities. And this action plan will be shared with the BC Ministry for Children and Families and Development, and may inform possible future investments that could come to Bowen from the province for creating childcare spaces on Bowen. So that's kind of the background around this, and the plan would inform some of those future decisions that may come from the province. So I'll just turn it over to Sudie. She's going to hit some of the main highlights for us that she discovered in her research.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Thank you, everybody, for having me tonight. Yeah, so we started this last fall, and like Shauna mentioned, had a variety of parts that we were interested in uncovering. The first one being sort of identifying the
the, available in the community as it exists right now. So I'll just give you some highlights on that. It was an eye-opening process. Bowen Island has had a population growth over the last 20 years of average of 34%. The bulk of that actually took place in 1996 with a huge population growth. This is all represented in the report if you've seen it. So what I found in sort of breaking down that population growth was actually once there was that massive boom of population growth, the number of children on Bowen has actually, or the growth of children has actually maintained rather than also boomed. And so we started to look at why it is that we're so pressed for childcare space, because it feels like we have a lot more kids than we used to have on Bowen. People really struggle to find childcare spaces. And when we broke down the wait lists at BCC, at places like Kinderhouse, Montessori, things like that, the wait lists show us that actually people are desperate for childcare, particularly in two areas, one being 0 to 2 infant toddler spaces, and also school age, after school, before school childcare. So really what that indicated to us was that even though the population growth of children has remained fairly steady, actually the number of families who need this support is growing regardless. We have more families on Bowen than we used to, so you can see in the report that actually the number of 2-parent and 1-parent homes has increased every year, even when the population has remained fairly steady. So more families are moving here, hence more families requiring that support. We then looked at kind of things that people are asking for in the community. We did this a few ways. I had several face-to-face conversations, showed up at some community events, did some informal and formal surveying, both online and in person. And really what people are asking for in terms of childcare was their top priorities were, number one, a childcare center, licensed home daycares, which are scarce on Bowen for a number of reasons, and also access to occasional care and occasional childminding, which the municipality has up to now been, through recreation, been able to provide it to some degree in a non-licensed format. So based on that, all that information of what we have, what we need, I just want to point you to those wait lists really quickly so that you can just see what we're dealing with. We have a wait list, for example, for infants and toddlers at the Bowen Children's Center, 26. That's 26 children that currently don't have childcare. 20 children on a wait list for daycare there. The after school club has 10 children on the wait list. Kinderhouse has actually 30 children. That's a home-based childcare center, and it has 30 children on its wait list. And the one thing I just want to clarify about this is that you can really commend this community for the way that they support each other in the absence of some of these resources.
Make it work, yeah.
They totally make it work, and the people who get creative around it, and has a certain number, for example, of licensed spaces, and she manages to somehow spread those out between like loaves and fishes between families, so that as many families as possible get some level of support. And I know Elizabeth does the same thing at Kinderhouse and also at Montessori. So I really commend this community for that. And also the other things, and some commending things, is really the partnerships that exist between yourselves, various community partners, the BICS, school. Those partnerships have proven to be key for a lot of the families, and I think that's something that this place can be really proud of. So just very briefly to go over some of the recommendations, we've sort of created some short, medium, and long-term recommendations. Short-term being things that would be recommended to happen within the next year. And one of those is to create a before-school program. This was something that's a real barrier for families who have to get on a ferry at 6:30, 6:20 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning. They can't get their children to school at the time that they need to leave. So that's something that is hopefully going to could provide space for up to 20 children between 6:30 and 8:30 a.m. Other short-term goals is identifying funding sources and partnerships for increased spaces for infants and toddlers at Bowen Children's Center. So, yeah, 26 infants are currently on the wait list. It's a pretty dire need for the population. And I know Bowen Children's Center is already in progress of revamping some of their programming in order to, again, spread that out a little bit further among the families that they have. So we put in the plan that it's recommended that Bowen Children's Center continue with that plan to make those changes. It's recommended that there be increased hours for occasional care on Bowen, and again, that's offered currently through Playcare with the Recreation Department. I believe just recently they added an extra block on Fridays. We'd like to recommend, the report recommends that they have 10 sessions per week, 2 sessions per day, allowing for a maximum number of 16 spaces. This is a place where you can take your child for a couple hours, get a few things accomplished. Increasing collaboration between organizations providing childcare on Bowen. So the Early Childhood Development Table has representatives from various sectors. I think we recommended that there be a subcommittee to look at creating a centralized wait list. There would be some funding required to do that, and that could be achieved through grant applications. And also just a recommendation that that table report quarterly to the municipality so that everybody's in the loop on what's happening there. And education to the Bowen Island community with regards to facility needs. So another short-term plan. Medium term, creation of a dedicated facility space to house the after-school club and before-school care. Retaining and maintaining partnerships with the Bowen Island Community School regarding the sharing of space for the existing 42 licensed spaces. It serves actually currently a total of 71 school-aged children in that program, which is remarkable, in 42 licensed spaces. Building a new infant toddler wing of the Bowen Children's Center. This is already part of the Bowen Children's Center's long-term plan, and it's recommended that they be supported to continue that process. Identifying and accessing funding to continue to support online childcare providers to pursue updates and training that would allow them to continue to participate. And again, Bowen Children's Center has been a real leader in this, sending some of their staff for ongoing training that allows them to meet the requirements of their license and could potentially expand space for them. And it was also recommended that this all be reassessed in 2022 after the next census is out. The timing of this comes, the data that I was using was from the 2016 census, so who knows how different the population is now. Potentially could be quite different. I know, again, you all know what housing prices are like, and so people are fleeing the city once they have a child to find a place that can accommodate their entire family. And then long-term plans, or long-term recommendations is that this council consider childcare space creation opportunities during discussions related to the use of community lands, development, amenities, and future community planning, so that this can continue to be front of mind for the families that are present here on Bowen. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah.
So just in conclusion, to bring us back to the recommendations, we're here, staff's recommending that council endorse this Bowen Island Community Childcare Space Creation Action Plan, the short, medium, and long-term goals as targets to be considered in future community planning, and that council continue to work with community organizations to support the creation of childcare spaces by applying a family-friendly lens to municipal policies and procedures.
Thank you, Shauna.
Great, thank, and I'm gonna be supporting the motion. I have a little 3-year-old niece, and I saw what my brother and sister-in-law had to go through to try to get space, so good on you guys for trying to create that, because it's probably also driving up the cost of childcare when it is so limited that providers are gonna be able to charge more and more, like, if there's a lack of rental housing, the cost is even gonna go up more, so that's another concern. Just a question around before and after school care. I used to sit on the Vancouver School Board, and we got very involved in that, where we actually had every single one of our schools mandated to retrofit to be able to provide before and after school care. And it was a lifesaver with my son, because you could drop them off and they're right at the school and all that. So I'm just curious, like under midterm, medium term, is there any talk with the West Van School Board on that? I know there's some issues here around, timing constraints based on, cleaning schedules and all that kind of stuff. It just, for me, we have a school sitting there, kids are going to school, it would make so much sense, and I've seen it work in Vancouver, be able to drop your kids off early at school, and then they can stay after school, and then parents can pick them up. So it just makes sense, instead of having to take them off-site, that when they're already on-site right there. So just if you have any comments around that, it'd be great.
I can speak to that.
I'll speak to that. Hi, everybody, nice to see you. So the West Vancouver School Board now has a mandate to work with any childcare organizations that supply before and after school care to the students in their schools. That also applies to Bowen Island. So we would like, as Bowen Children's Center, you'll see us in March, we would like to have a little piece of land where we can put in some kind of a portable in order to offer that to families on Bowen. And we work very closely with the rec center, which also, if you read the report, you will see that in the summer there's a huge problem for families because the rec center programs finish at 3. So if we were able to do that, we would be able to work together with the rec center to provide before and after so that families can actually go to work from an 8-hour day. So to answer your question, yes, we are in touch with the West Vancouver School Board. We are very supportive of anything we do to provide before and after school care for the families that attend their schools.
Just quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Why not use the space in the school for that? Why build a separate structure for that?
So right now, we are using, the after-school club has doubled. So we've gone from having 20 childcare licensed space to having 2, one of 20 and one of 22. So we use the CUR, the community use room, and the multi-purpose room as well, both every day. Because those rooms are used by other groups, it's very hard to provide a real quality program. The kitchen is downstairs. We have 6 staff. We have more staff than we're required because we have to have someone run up and downstairs with the food, preparing the food, this and that. There's other programs in the CUR which prevent us from having the for-school care because their programming would run into our programming, so we can't use it. It's just everybody uses those rooms, so it would be really beneficial to have our own purpose-built portable where we could run it. We have 71 families, so every day we service 42 children. That's a lot to do in a temporary space. So that's what we're looking to make that more permanent.
So not being a fan of unused empty spaces, your before and after school dedicated space would be used during the 6 hours of the school.
I think we'd find usage for
Okay,
that.
but then I guess I'm also thinking like all those classrooms aren't used once the kids leave school, so why can't the classroom for the 2 portables be used?
We couldn't use we tried to use the portable, but we were denied access because they do use it for different things after school. And you have to have the permission of the teachers who are in those particular classrooms in order to be able to use it, because some of them stay later, they do other things. The reason we could use the multi-purpose room was because the vice principal had another office, and that's where she was located, so that's how we got into the multipurpose room. But even still, it's not ideal, because we have no storage space. We have one cupboard for 42 children for all our equipment. And no matter how generous the rec center is with letting us use the gym, when we can, we never know when we get it. We never know what we can do. It's a difficult program to operate.
Will there be, if we get to move all the rec center stuff into the new community center, will that free up some of our, is it rec programming that's
It would
being
free
used
up,
in the community use room?
it would free up the
multipurpose room?
community use room in the mornings, because Care will move. The plan is for Care to move to the community center. I wouldn't, there's still, obviously, we will still be using the school gym, so I don't know that that would free up space in the gym after school. I guess just to also, to add to Anne's point, it's difficult having various ages sharing the same spaces. So having the after-school care be able to have their Lego and small beads and things like that, that they use in the after-school hours, it becomes a bit of a, the staff is very good at making sure those hazards are cleared away, but that is always a concern when the babies are crawling around on the floor the next morning. So there are some overlapping issues that happen with having those different age groups sharing the same space.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank you for the quality of this report, that you got data. There's nothing like getting good data to really drive a point home. I was really struck by the toddlers and infants, a wait list of 26 when there's only 12 spaces. So you get a handful of graduates each year, graduates, so to speak. So it's not a wait list, it's a sorry list. And so thank you for this. It's, I certainly support the recommendation.
Maureen?
Thank you. I appreciated the report. The thing that gave me pause was characterizing it as an action plan. And it wasn't clear to me who the driver was going to be behind the action plan was. Do you see that as the municipality, or like who's going to ensure some of these things actually happen?
I think, so with writing the recommendations, we tried hard to keep that not specific, because it will be the organizations who are already providing childcare will be mostly the driver. There may be some partnership opportunities with the municipality. But for example, I think if BCC is interested in starting before school care, they would be sourcing out space to do that, and they would be providing that care. So the municipality may be in support of building permits or something. If there was going to be a new building that was built, there may be that way to support that initiative, which is, I believe, what happened with the new infant toddler wing currently at BCC, that things were helped through the building planning department to move that along quickly.
And you would continue to be the contact person within the municipality for the purposes of these?
Where it makes sense, I would be the contact person for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything?
No, I'd just like to say, what I appreciate is the in-depth and the quality of your presentation, because some of us, sadly, have rather moved beyond the realm of dealing with toddlers and children, which is to our great loss. So therefore, we actually get remarkably out of touch very quickly with the actual numbers involved. And I think what your report has done has highlighted those needs very, very articulately. But for someone who's not directly involved, I appreciate that, because I couldn't have guessed those numbers without your information. So thank you.
It's a great report, and I really appreciate having it documented like this, because it's all the assumptions that you make, and then you wonder. And your own experience. I was somebody who had a child in, well, back when it was at Collins Hall, and Bowen Childcare Center, and we were one of the families whose little toddler was out there digging the little hole at the new site. And so I'm really happy to see this. I think anything that makes families more secure especially in these times of affordable housing, is of the need for affordable housing and affordable everything is something that we as a municipality seems to be one of our primary things, and it's rare that we get to actually support children and families, so I'm happy to, I'd be happy to make the motion.
Sure.
Okay, that council endorse the Bowen Island Community Childcare Space Creation Action Plan, short, medium, and long-term goals as targets to be considered in future community planning, and that council continue to work with community organizations to support the creation of childcare spaces by applying a family-friendly lens to municipal policies and procedures.
Second to Rob. Just before we vote on that, I would say that being a grandfather that has all kinds of kids in the system, it's really problematic. And I think part of it goes back to that it's not traditional. Everybody's working. That's the problem. Moms and dads are working, or single moms or whatever. And that, I think that really exasperates the problem. There's no question about that. But I'm sure glad you did this great report there. Thanks, Scooby. And it highlights it, it brings it to council, and it'll bring it to the rest of the community that we have to think about childcare going forward in everything we do. Anyway, any further discussion? I'll ask a question. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Correspondence going on with service from the Islands Trust sign at the ferry dock entrance to Bowen Island.
I can speak to that.
Just correspondence?
We received a letter from the Conservancy.
Yes.
I did some digging,
Yeah.
cannot locate the sign. I spoke with Claire Frater at Islands Trust, and she confirmed what I sort of found out was that the sign was in significant disrepair, and it was taken to be repaired, and it was just rotten, so it was not done and is likely been disposed of thereafter. It is on their radar. It has been for some time since they did their rebrand to do new signage. And she said there is available budget this year, and they're really keen to do it. And this is sort of the kind of the push they needed to get to it. So they'd like to work with the staff on how that would look and what we would like it to say, and integrating it with First Nations place names, and sort of figuring that out as well. So I've drafted a motion here, and
You should read it out.
yes, so the council received a letter from the Bowen Island Conservative Board dated January 26, 2020, and council requests municipal staff to work with Islands Trust staff to replace the roadside signage at the entrance to Bowen Island.
Can we delete the word roadside? Because roadside to me implies down at the bottom of the lot line, very specific.
Yes.
There's lots of other, so
Signage.
just say, just to replace the signage.
Yeah, happily.
That's fine.
Okay.
I still
Amendment?
move it. Yes.
Still move it. Second. Thank you, David. And any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
I was hoping they would just send us a sign, like.
Another sign.
It'll
I don't
happen.
suspect it'll be a drawing.
You couldn't by any chance find a way of removing another one, so they just don't become sign central down there.
Okay, so under new business, the Rent Smart program. Maureen?
I actually have a written report on that, and I'll circulate it.
Okay.
But I'll just give you the gist of it right
Thank
now.
you.
It's a background here on what we did with the Rent Smart program, which is delivered to landlords and to tenants, and it introduces them to their rights and responsibilities, respective rights and responsibilities, and helps them sort of figure out how to have a better relationship. We held 3 workshops last year, one for tenants, 2 for landlords. We covered the costs jointly between BIM and Birch. BIM had funding for the housing series, and that's the umbrella that this was done under. The facilitators was Tess Taylor. She trained to deliver these sessions, and in total 20 people went through the training, did it on the weekend. So there are 2 workshops that are scheduled for this spring. What this requests is consideration, just to receive the info report, to continue general support of Rent Smart, and to consider allocating some funds from strategic priorities to ensure the continuity of the, sorry, I'm getting very tired, the continuity of the program. But I'll send this separately, and I don't think the recommendation needs to be put into the minutes formally at this point. So I'll just send it for info.
Okay, thanks, I'll take the council on Metro Vancouver business.
A couple of things. So there was a council meeting
Yeah.
on the weekend, on Saturday, and it was really it was very, very good. There were a series of presentations. A lot of it was on Metro Vancouver housing, on the 10-year plan, but also on the expression of interest process. We're all aware of that now, so I don't think I need to talk any more about it, but I do urge, if you haven't had a chance to read the 10-year plan, just skip through it. It's really, look at the goals. It really describes, I think, how important that organization is to Metro Vancouver housing. The other thing, the Climate Action Committee, one of the interesting things that it does every year is it looks at Metro Vancouver's put some funds aside for sustainability innovation projects. And you know, there's about 12 million sitting in a pot in several areas. And so so we went over all the projects, and there's some really interesting ones. And 3 of them involve Metro Vancouver housing. And one is to find ways to add renewable energy to attached housing. Another was to find ways of building more energy efficient homes in attached housing. And a third was to renovate existing homes. And so these are all 3 things we know have to be done in terms of reducing emissions from homes. But because they're doing it within Metro Vancouver housing, which are lower cost housing, it's already automatically going to deal with the biggest issue, which is costs, which is what always crops up. So those should be very interesting. The results will be shared with everybody, and we can all build good from that. The other thing which I'll just mention, because it was mentioned also in the Council of Councils, because I have a personal interest, and this is Metro Vancouver parks. One of the things that in streams and protecting parks they need to do is figure out what are all the creatures that live there. And for streams, the way they do it is they just go in there and count. Or sometimes they actually put electric shocks in the stream and everything gets stuck for a while and they count. So these are very invasive ways of doing it. So
really sad.
I know, it's very sad. So what Metro Vancouver is doing is there's a great little video I could share with you if you want to have a look at it. But it's interesting to me because my son is one of the scientists who's been working on this for about 8 or 10 years. And what they do is they just do a sample of the water at the mouth of the stream.
Yep.
And they investigate the DNA. And they from that can figure out what creatures are living in the stream and about the around.
Cool.
So Metro Vancouver is taking this science, it's leading edge science out at UVic, and they're extending it to have some other creatures they're going to be checking for, some frogs and things of that sort. So I don't know if it will apply to Crippen Park. It could well down the line, but it's certainly through Metro Vancouver Parks. It's an innovative process that they're doing, groundbreaking research. So it was fun to hear about.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Super. Thanks, dude. Okay, council, update the Council on Islands Trust business.
Sure,
Sue Ellen and Michael.
I'll just follow up quickly. One of the things that was great to hear at the Metro Vancouver meeting was all the work they're putting into yet another liquid waste treatment plant, which will help pollution in the marine waters all around our areas and the Salish Sea. And they're going to punch routes for freshwater marshes through Iona Island, for example, so there's not so many fish traps, places where the salmon get trapped so easier for salmon habitat, whales, seabirds, all those kinds of things, which relate to the Islands Trust. So I handed out a few cards from the Islands Trust there as the neighboring conservation outfit. I see you looking at the clock. I'll just let you know that Bowen, council asked me to check at a recent meeting. Bowen is included in the mapping of the coastal Douglas fir forests, and it's in the RFP. And anyway, that's all checked. And the upcoming Trust Council will be in a couple of weeks on Salt Spring Island, and the Bowen tax levy is currently destined to be a 5% decrease because Bowen's property taxes have gone down in comparison to other places. So that's in the budget that hopefully we will be passing on at Trust Council.
Okay.
That decrease means it goes down by about $12,000 from
Yeah.
last year.
Yes.
Puts it in the 320s.
Yeah.
Thousands. I think you've stolen my thunder, actually. So, fair enough. We're meeting in Salt Spring, and yes, we do have a meeting in Nanaimo next Wednesday on the requisition, and I think probably more pertinently report back at next council meeting as well, and we'll let people know how
that all unfolds.
how it all proceeds.
There may be a few changes. Everybody's concerned about freshwater mapping and possibilities for the future, so there may be other changes, and we'll bring that information back.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Maureen on Metro Vancouver Regional Parks.
We did meet about a week and a half ago. The important element of the open meeting was the presentation of what's called the Natural Resource Management Framework, and it deals with the values, the principles for managing the natural resources within the park system, and handling things in a consistent way across the entire region, across the 23 parks. It would be worth looking at in the Parks Committee and our Parks Committee. And Bonnie, I think you would find it quite interesting for your work.
Is that in your recent meeting agenda?
Yes, it's in the open meeting agenda. And then the rest of the meeting was enclosed. We're just dealing with a lot of sensitive issues at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Maureen. And translated mayor's council meetings.
Meeting on Thursday, and there will be an update on the intermunicipal business licensing, and I think Tess and Daniel will be bringing something to the March 9th meeting. All the municipalities are dealing with it. Surrey was supposed to be dealing with it today, but I haven't had a chance to look at the news, and Vancouver tomorrow. So everybody except Dallas-Kerr at this point is signed on to deal with it. And the other big agenda item will be the report on the conversion and up to the electric bus fleet, which isn't simple. It sounds easy to buy a bus, but it's not. You've got all the
Charging.
the timing and the, can the bus make the route without having to get charged en route, and just all the other stuff that goes along with it.
May I ask, why hasn't Dallas-Kerr signed on?
I have no idea. Maybe I was just looking at the report, we just got the agenda detail, and I was just looking at the report, and some of the Fraser Valley regional municipalities are signing on as well, because our region goes from Pemberton all the way up to Hope for the licensing.
Okay, so the items removed from the consent agenda. Both here, Allison, number 3.5, municipal officers and indemnification bylaw.
There's a, I can't think, Jen, back. Why is this, my computer is frozen.
Do you want me to read the recommendation?
No. In the actual bylaw, there is, in the actual bylaw itself, this has to have been updated. It's been on the work list for years, and I have no problem with updating it. But there's a whole list of powers and duties and responsibilities of the chief administrative officer that we did not have in the previous bylaw. So my first question is, where did those come from? And the other question is, point C talks about appointing acting department heads, which then raises the question, who appoints the actual department heads? And I was questioning the word why acting was in there. And then the other was reorganizing the administrative structure of the municipality from time to time in order to improve the efficient and effective operation. Have no problem with the concept, but the one up above, on D, was determining compensation of employees in accordance with policies and budgets. And a reorganization could have budget implications. So, anyhow, where did all the...
I'm happy to take it all out or amend it. It's just in the bylaws that I was looking at from other communities,
Yeah.
there was a lot of these, almost all were identical.
Yeah. So,
It just sort of gives flesh to what the duties
No,
of the
I'm
CAO are.
not
And
bothered
it's pretty
with having
limited
more
in the
detail.
legislation. If you have edits, I'm happy to incorporate
Yeah,
them.
well, certainly the C for Charlie, having appointing acting department heads begs the question of who appoints the actual
I
department
can just,
head.
I can answer that. My read of this is that in 4.1b, the CAO, Chief Administrative Officer, appoints, promotes, disciplines, suspends, terminates any employee of the municipality subject to a contract for employment or collective agreement other than an officer. So what I would take from that is that the council is responsible for hiring and just terminating the CAO, the corporate officer, and the chief financial officer. Those are the officers. And then the CAO is responsible for the rest of the stuff.
Okay, but acting department heads would be somebody that's the head of recreation or public works. Those are departments, they're not officers. So,
for example, like Aaron is the acting fire chief.
Yeah.
CAO would designate him the
yeah,
acting fire chief.
but who's gonna designate the fire chief?
The CAO does.
Okay, but,
Anyone that's not an
Yes.
officer.
Explain that.
no, that's an officer.
No.
So if you're not an officer, then the officers are appointed by council.
Okay, so why bother having, if you've got the authority to promote, isn't that the same as?
Why don't we just
acting?
delete C?
Well, appointing acting department heads, that could be, for example, appointing an active corporate officer. Even though.
No, then you
the
say
council-
acting officers.
Can I,
Well, it's the department heads. Well,
Not all department managers are officers.
No, but
So-
all department managers get appointed by the CAO.
can I,
except,
interest
well,
of-
not really.
Yeah.
This is
in the interest of time, and seeing that you've got, these are valid points, but it's only being read the first, second, and third time, and our corporate officer said she's open to input. I propose to move the motion. So I would like to move that bylaw number 485, 2019, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Officer, Employee, and Indemnification Bylaw number 485, 2019, be read a first, second, and third time.
Second.
There is still a further approval, there's still adoption to come?
Yeah.
Yeah. We
Councilor Morris, you can send me your edits and I'm happy to bring forward
I
those.
thought I had sent you an email, I'm sorry you didn't get it.
I'll have to check. Usually pretty good at responding.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you. Unanimous. And the other one, Allison? The minutes of the Transportation Advisory
Oh,
Committee?
yeah,
No recommendation for council to
well,
observe?
that was the interesting part. Which number was that one?
3.8.
3.8.
If you look at the minutes, and then you look at the underlying reports, the work plan has a recommendation in the report that it be taken to council for approval. But, so then my question is, there's no reference referring it to council. So a process question, are work plans supposed to come to council for information and our attention be drawn to them? So there is a work plan in here for the Transportation Committee. And if you look at the work plan, I'm not sure it has, then leads me to a question of, has all those items been covered in the budget? Because there's quite a bit of dollars in there.
David,
These
sharing the
are-
light on that? I see you were staked in there.
Yeah.
Telephone.
These were, these are all part of the transportation plan. These are all elements pulled out of the transportation plan, but they all have to go into the budget, so.
Well, that's my question, I guess, is because we don't have the work plan, or it hasn't been presented to council for input, and then I don't know whether I don't have enough budget detail to know what's in the budget, so, the question would be, you know, there's fairly detailed steps and money in this, in the work plan, so A, are we supposed to be receiving it for information and comment, like the recommendation says at the top of the report, but it didn't end up in the minutes? And are those things all included in the budget? Because this work plan is coming in now, and I think Raj gave his cut for the budget a month or two ago.
Well, and our assumption, any of these things, I mean, they were already in the plan, in the, you know, the transportation plan, but any of the budget pieces have to get approved every year, so they're all taken to the budget.
So my question to Raj would be, looking at the work plan, are they in the budget?
I haven't looked at the work plan, but submissions to the budget come from the manager responsible for overseeing the project. So the transportation work plan has projects in them. They're not gonna make it to the budget unless either Emma or, Daniel, put them forward to us.
And so that was one question. And then I had some curiosity questions. There were some comments about the rezoning community plan application, talking about Miller Road, but we're talking about a whole bunch of senior road upgrades. And then, and financial amenities that are earned from upcoming rezoning, upzoning be contributed towards senior road and other upgrades. So they're sort of making, those will come back in Daniel's report on the, okay, that was that. And then, what is a flashing beacon that is to be installed at the corner of Miller and Trunk Road?
It's, where is that? What it is, this is we have letters about the safety of that intersection.
Yeah.
And if you try it, and you need to park in the little lot there, and
Oh,
area
yeah.
1 of lot 2, and then walk down through there with, you have lights coming at you and it's raining, it's very hard to see. And everybody feels it's a very dangerous corner. I know we've asked Hydro to fix the light, and I think they finally done that.
Yeah.
But there's feeling that nevertheless, it's still a very dark spot, and it's really hard to see when the lights, the cars are coming
Yeah.
at you, they're reflecting. And so the better idea would be to have some sort of crosswalk type of lighting, such as we have at the top.
So
outside the
that's
school.
what you're meaning by that?
That's what that was about, yes.
So a flashing something?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I've seen even West Bend is using those now, even though they've got lots of money, hydro pools right there, still put them.
And what are sharrows,
What or what?
along with painting sharrows on Miller Road?
Sharrows are those arrows that say, this is a shared roadway, share with bikes and walkers. And,
Cheryl's.
sharrows, like arrows that share.
So, we haven't got a motion to receive the work plan, so I guess that'll come to the next council meeting, since I'm understanding that we should be physically receiving them.
Sure.
I'll fight the item.
Yeah,
I'll fight it
I
in
agree
minutes
with
and
that.
bring it up as staff.
But I do agree.
All right, Allison? Thank you very much.
It's a weird name.
So that just about wraps it. We do have question period.
We have to move the recommendation.
Uh,
Oh, no, it's just a,
No,
It's
There
just
was
a,
there was no recommendation, sorry. Yeah.
no problem. No? Yeah, nothing.
No questions?
No, we don't, you know what, we don't have any answers. We're all out of answers.
There was one.
Thank you very much. And I